Turn now to that special report from NBC News.
From NBC News, this is a special report. Here's Savannah Guthrie and Craig Melvin.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. We come on the air a bit early this morning with the very latest on the breaking news out of the nation's capital. An American Airlines flight with 64 people on board colliding midair with a Black Hawk military helicopter on a training exercise. The tragedy all caught on camera.
Well, the two aircraft crashed into the frigid Potomac River near Reagan National, where a massive rescue operation is unfolding at this hour. And we can tell you right now that at least 12 bodies have been recovered so far.
And the jet that was involved here, it was Flight 5342, American Airlines, coming from Wichita, Kansas, just about to land. And we've learned this morning that members of the figure skating community who were returning from a camp held at this weekend's national championships were on that plane. Let's bring in NBC's Tom Costello, who's at the scene, which is still a search and rescue operation this morning. Tom, what can you tell us?
Yeah, that's right. This has been ongoing through the night. This happened just before 9 p.m. The D.C. Fire Department says they got the first alarm at 2058, so 8:58, and they swamped the area, flooded the area with emergency personnel, firefighters and rescue personnel, police from D.C., from Virginia, from Maryland, Coast Guard apparatus, helicopters moved in from across the entire region looking for any victims, but that water is absolutely terribly cold. It's murky, it's dark, and it is shallow. It's about 7 to 8 feet. We do know that they recovered a piece of the fuselage, a pretty big chunk of the fuselage. Reportedly, the fuselage had broken in half. Again, 64 people on board. At this hour, we have no reports of pulling any survivors from the water. We have only reports that they have recovered some of the remains of the victims. As for the helicopter, a Black Hawk helicopter, 3 crew members on board, and one report last night was it was literally upside down in the water, and divers were struggling to stabilize it before they could go into the chopper. Because of the frigid temps, and it was actually warmer yesterday than it has been for the better part of 2 weeks, but the water here has been awfully cold. The wind has been very cold, and so these divers through the night have been working in very dangerous conditions, and we've got tremendous air traffic in the skies right now with helicopters traversing the river and right next to Reagan Airport, I should say, literally right off the end of the runway. And so Reagan Airport is closed, and all of this helicopter traffic being very closely coordinated by air traffic controllers.
Tom, to that point, let's talk about air traffic control for a moment here. In a situation like this, do we know whether the commercial jet pilot is talking to the same air traffic controller as the military helicopter pilot?
He should have been. Now, the military chopper pilot can also and will probably also be on his own frequencies. However, we do believe, according to the air traffic control transcript, that controllers did tell that chopper pilot to be aware of the regional jet coming in, and that chopper pilot should, in fact, pass behind the regional jet. But the video that you're showing shows what appears to be the chopper pilot literally coming up and hitting the rear of that regional jet as the jet was approaching runway 33 here at Reagan Airport. You know, Reagan Airport is a very busy airport. It's not the busiest or the biggest in the country. However, it has the single busiest runway in the country, runway 1, and this was coming into runway 33 right next to it. This is a shorter haul flight, of course. It's a regional jet. Runway 1 usually takes longer jets. So this is coming in for a shorter landing, and it never made it to the runway.
Tom, stand by there. Pilots say it's a very tricky approach at Reagan National for a number of reasons. We want to turn now to former NTSB and FAA investigator Jeff Gazzetti. So, Jeff, I mean, just taking a look at what you can see on the screen, the air traffic control tower information that we've heard, what are your impressions this morning?
Good morning, Savannah. Well, I think it's too early to tell what may have been involved, what may have caused this accident. We need to wait for the methodical work of the NTSB. It appears that you had a helicopter flying along an established low-level route on that east side of the Potomac River. and communicating with Reagan air traffic controllers. And you had the American Eagle plane on final approach, also communicating with controllers. The NTSB is going to be interviewing these controllers. They're going to be listening very carefully to the audio of the air traffic controllers. Communications will play a role in determining what may have happened here, but it's just too early to tell. Unfortunately, it was dark out, and night flight and picking up other traffic when you're in a congested airspace like that can be challenging to any pilot.
A lot's been made about how congested that airspace is all the time around Reagan National. Hey, Jeff, are helicopters under any circumstances, are they ever permitted to cross an airplane flight line?
It depends, Craig. So it depends on what kind of control they're under with air traffic controllers. In this case, it appears that the controller did point out traffic to the helicopter and said it could pass behind the Canadair regional jet. But, whether or not the pilot actually saw the target that the controller was pointing out to them and what the exact route was for that helicopter and whether it was on the proper routing, we just don't know yet.
What about the perspective of the pilot of this regional passenger jet? I mean, here it is in the final moments of approach, a time when the captain and the co-captain have their attention fixated, of course, on the landing. It's a quite complicated landing, as I understand it. From what we can see, would that pilot have had any perspective about this helicopter that potentially could be hitting it?
Again, we just don't know, Savannah. This helicopter could have been behind the Canadair regional jet. So in that case, the pilots couldn't visually see, but on their cockpit screens, there could be a traffic collision alerting system that could depict targets. But as you indicate, this airplane was on a short final. It was coming straight into runway 33 on a short final approach. And at that point, you're looking at the runway and things are busy in the cockpit. You're monitoring your instruments. You're concentrating on setting down on the runway. And that could be a distraction or could take away the attention of scanning for other traffic.
All right, Jeff, stand by. Tom, I want to bring you back in here for a moment here. For folks who aren't familiar with Reagan National Airport, with DCA there, explain what it is exactly that makes it so difficult, so tricky for pilots who are taking off, who are landing at that particular airport.
Well, first of all, since 9/11, so 20 some odd years ago, you pilots have not been allowed to fly over Washington, D.C. proper, right? You cannot fly over the White House, over the Capitol building, over the Lincoln Memorial. You have to come in. Essentially, you're shooting the runways by coming down, either up or down the Potomac River. And that requires that they have to make a turn, no matter which way they're coming. If they're coming from the north or if they're coming from the south, they kind of do a last-minute bank to hit their runway. Pilots have to be on their game to hit these runways. But I've talked to a lot of pilots who say they love coming into Reagan National because it does require some piloting skills, and that's what they love to do. But what's challenging here is that it literally sits across the river from a very busy heliport, a military heliport. There's a lot of activity coming and going with not only Marine One for the president, comes in and out of that helicopter base. We've also got Coast Guard operations up and down the river. There's diplomatic helicopter activity. There's also police helicopter activity. So this is a very busy corridor, and when you are in this area, you will notice you don't see any air traffic over Washington, D.C. if you're a tourist, but you get to the river and you'll start to see a lot of air traffic, and that's where the planes are coming in at the same time. So, to be working air traffic control here at Reagan National, you already have to be a good controller. You've got to be on your game. We've had some close calls here in recent years at Reagan National with planes getting too close to each other, and some of them have had to suddenly wave off at the last minute, abort a landing, if you will, abort a takeoff at the last minute, and we've had some issues where that was either a pilot error or air traffic control error. You've got to be on your game at this airport. So there's going to be a lot of focus right now on the tower and then on the pilots. And was there a breakdown in communication?
All right, Tom, thank you. If you're just waking up, 64 people on a regional jet. subject of a search and rescue operation right now in the icy waters of the Potomac River outside Washington after a Black Hawk helicopter, a military helicopter on a training mission, collided with it late last night. We will continue to cover the story.
More than a dozen bodies have been recovered so far. We will have the very latest coming up top of the hour right here on Today and throughout the day on NBC News Now and NBCnews.com. This has been an NBC News Special Report.